Excitement is building as we get closer to production at the Toyota battery plant.
That massive $14 billion facility at the Greensboro-Randolph megasite is just weeks away from making their first shipments.
In the country, there's going to be a very good chance that your new Toyota hybrid, plug-in hybrid, or electric vehicle will be powered by a battery that comes off the line in this facility.
In early 2025, the United States launched one of the most aggressive economic experiments in modern history. The goal was simple: build a fortress around American manufacturing to save it. But the result has been a catastrophe. In just 12 months, the auto industry didn't boom, it bled. $18 billion in new costs evaporated instantly. At Toyota's massive Georgetown plant, the assembly lines didn't speed up, they went silent. The average price of a family vehicle rocketed past $50,000, not because of luxury features, but because of a policy that turned the Made in America label into a financial liability. We were told these 25% tariffs would bring jobs home. Instead, they have triggered a silent evacuation. While American factories are cutting shifts and hemorrhaging cash, a neighbor to the north is quietly picking up the pieces. They aren't building walls, they are unlocking doors. And right now, they are stealing the future of the North American auto industry right from under Uncle Sam's nose. This is the story of how the United States accidentally sabotaged its own economy, and why the next Detroit might actually be in Ontario. To understand why the industry is collapsing, you have to look past the headlines and look at the sticker price on the windshield. If you bought a new car in the United States this year, you likely paid a patriotism premium of roughly $3,000. That is not for better leather seats or a faster engine. That is the direct cost of trade barriers passed straight to your wallet. The logic behind the 25% tariff was seductive. By taxing foreign parts, the government believed it would force automakers to source everything domestically. It was sold as a shield, a way to insulate American factories from global competition. But the architects of this policy fundamentally misunderstood how a modern car is built. In 2025, there is no such thing as a 100% American vehicle. The automotive supply chain is a global organism. A Ford assembled in Michigan relies on electronics from Asia, specialized steel from Brazil, and high-precision sensors from Europe. In fact, nearly 40% of the value of an American-made vehicle originates from outside the country. So when Washington slapped a 25% tax on imports, they didn't just tax foreign companies, they taxed the very ingredients American factories need to survive. The impact was immediate and mathematical. The cost of raw materials like steel, copper, and aluminum surged between 18% and 40%. Automakers found themselves in a trap. They couldn't simply switch to local suppliers because in many cases, those domestic suppliers either didn't exist at the necessary scale or were already running at capacity. The result? The Center for Automotive Research found that automakers operating within the U.S. were forced to absorb nearly $18 billion in new costs in the first year alone. This was money that could have been spent on R&D, wage increases, or factory expansion. Instead, it evaporated to pay a tax bill. When input costs rise, businesses have two choices: raise prices or cut production. The U.S. auto industry did both. Production across the continent fell by more than 20,000 vehicles per day. The shield meant to protect the industry became a suffocating weight, dragging down efficiency and pricing the average American family out of the market. And as we are about to see, when you make it too expensive to build cars in America, companies stop building them there. They start looking for a new home. The tragedy of this policy isn't found in corporate earnings reports. To truly see the damage, you have to look at the ground level, where the abstract concept of economics becomes the brutal reality of livelihoods. For decades, the Toyota plant in Georgetown, Kentucky, was the industrial heartbeat of the region. It was a machine that never slept. But this year, that heartbeat skipped a beat. The production of Lexus vehicles halted. The output of the RAV4, the best-selling SUV in America, was throttled back. When a facility of that magnitude slows down, it doesn't just affect the workers inside, it sends a shockwave through the entire community. We are witnessing a classic economic domino effect. The first to fall were the trucking routes. Logistics companies that once ran on precision schedules are now filled with pauses. Drivers who spent their careers moving steel and finished cars are now sitting in idling cabs waiting for loads that simply aren't there. When the trucks stop moving, the cash flow stops for thousands of independent operators. Then, the shockwave hit the supplier hubs across the Midwest and the South. These are the metal fabricators, the tool and die shops, and the component producers. They don't have the deep pockets of a multinational corporation. They operate on thin margins. When Toyota or Ford cuts production by 10% to offset tariff costs, these smaller suppliers are forced to cut overtime, freeze hiring, or close their doors entirely. The local diners, hardware stores, and businesses that depend on those factory paychecks are watching their revenue dry up. And finally, the damage lands on the American family. As automakers pass these tariff costs down the line, the average price of a new car in the United States has shattered the $50,000 barrier. Families that once viewed a new car as an attainable milestone are now being priced out of the market, forced to hold on to aging used vehicles. Demand is crashing not because people don't want cars, but because the policy designed to help them has made it affording one impossible. This turmoil resembles the aftermath of a global recession, yet the global economy is growing. This is a uniquely American problem, a self-inflicted wound. And while the American industrial engine sputters and stalls, a competitor is watching from just across the border, ready to turn this chaos into their opportunity. While the United States retreats behind a wall of tariffs and protectionism, a very different story is unfolding just north of the 49th parallel. Canada isn't watching the chaos in the American auto sector with fear. They're watching it with a strategy. And right now, that strategy is turning the country into the world's quietest industrial superpower. For years, Canada was seen as the polite, smaller sibling of the American manufacturing giant. But in the face of Washington's unpredictable policy shifts, Canada has played a masterstroke. They haven't offered aggressive rhetoric. They have offered something far more valuable to multi-billion-dollar corporations: boring, predictable stability.
Global automakers are allergic to uncertainty. They plan in decades, not election cycles. While the U.S. government changes the rules of the game with sudden tariff spikes, the Canadian government has signaled that their doors and their markets are wide open. They have leveraged trade agreements like the CPTPP and USMCA to position themselves not just as an island, but as a gateway to Europe and Asia. But the allure of Canada goes beyond just politics. It comes down to hard physics and economics. The future of the automobile is electric, and electricity is where Canada holds a lethal advantage. Thanks to a grid powered largely by hydroelectricity, energy costs for industrial plants in Canada are estimated to be 20% lower than in the United States. In an industry where margins are fought over pennies, a 20% reduction in energy overhead is not just a saving, it is a game changer. The proof is already in the concrete being poured in Ontario. Take the case of Honda. While other manufacturers were scaling back in the US, Honda announced a historic, transformational project in Canada, a $15 billion comprehensive electric vehicle and battery manufacturing complex. This isn't a small satellite factory. It is a fortress of the future, projected to churn out 240,000 EVs per year and 36 gigawatt-hours of batteries by 2028. Why Ontario? Because Honda found a partner willing to offer $5 billion in incentives and, more importantly, a guarantee of long-term security. Toyota is following suit, strengthening its Canadian footprint where it already produces 500,000 vehicles annually. The dynamic has shifted. Canada is no longer just a branch plant economy. By offering clean energy, open trade lanes, and political sanity, they are becoming the safe harbor for capital fleeing the storm in the United States. The message to the global industry is clear. If you want to build the car of the future without the headache of a trade war, you don't go to Detroit anymore. You go north. What we're witnessing right now isn't a temporary fluctuation. It is a permanent rewriting of the industrial map. If you zoom out, you can almost see the center of gravity shifting. For a century, the undeniable heavyweight of automotive power was the American Midwest, but the data suggests that era is ending. We're watching a great migration of capital, talent, and steel. The list of companies rethinking their relationship with the United States reads like a who's who of the global auto industry. Volvo, Mercedes-Benz, Audi, and Hyundai, titans that once rushed to build on American soil, are now pivoting. They are shifting their manufacturing footprints, scaling back activity at U.S. plants, or redirecting their next generation of investments elsewhere. They aren't abandoning the American consumer, but they are quietly divorcing the American worker. The trajectory is terrifying for U.S. policymakers. Researchers warn that if these trends continue, the United States could lose up to 1/4 of the entire North American auto supply chain by 2030. That is a hollowing out of industrial capacity that may never be recovered. Meanwhile, Canada is no longer just a participant, it is becoming the protagonist. Projections indicate that Canada could capture up to 40% of the region's electric vehicle and battery capacity by the end of the decade. This is a staggering market share for a country with 1/10 the population of the U.S. The divide is widening in real time. In the U.S., the narrative is about protecting what is left, saving jobs, applying tariffs, and subsidizing legacy plants. In Canada, the narrative is about building what is next. Japanese automakers already produce nearly half of all vehicles built in Canada, totaling close to 930,000 units a year. Research centers in Windsor and Ontario are expanding, generating a new ecosystem of engineering jobs that looks more like Silicon Valley than the Rust Belt. By 2030, the industrial map of North America will look radically different. One side is choosing isolation and facing a slow contraction. The other is choosing global integration and preparing for a boom. The Detroit of the future is being built right now, but it isn't in Michigan. It's in Ontario. And once that infrastructure is built, it doesn't move back. The United States isn't just losing a few factories, it is losing the generational race for the 21st century. Wall Street doesn't lie. While politicians make speeches, the financial reports for Q1 2025 are screaming a warning. The damage is quantifiable. Toyota's North American operations swung into a loss for the first time in recent history, dragged down by roughly $3 billion in tariff-related expenses. Executives were forced to slash profit forecasts by 16%. Meanwhile, titans like GM, Ford, and Tesla are staring down double-digit declines in earnings per share. They remain profitable for now, but the strain is accumulating. This brings us to the ultimate irony of this entire saga. The United States built a wall to protect its industry, but that wall is blocking the sunlight. By trying to shield American workers from global competition, we are inadvertently sending their jobs to the one place that offers a sanctuary from the chaos: Canada. So here is the question we all need to ask ourselves. Is the patriotism premium worth it? Are you willing to pay $55,000 for a car and watch your local factory cut shifts just to support a policy that claims to put America first? Or is it time to admit that in a global economy, isolation is just a slow form of suicide? The center of gravity is moving north. The question is, will the United States wake up before Detroit becomes a ghost town again? What do you think? Is Canada smart for seizing the moment? Or is the U.S. right to protect its borders at any cost? Let me know in the comments below.